Can you see the screen that I'm sharing, Rabia?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so just give me 1 second to figure out if others are joining today. Okay, so they'll be joining in a bit. So till then, do you have any doubts, Rabia, to begin with?
No, sir.
No. Okay, so in the last class, would you like to give a quick recap of what we did in the last class? Basically, what were the main things we discussed?
Yes, sir. We were doing fragmentation and regeneration.
Yeah, we did. We also did binary fission, right? Binary
Yes, sir.
fission and budding, and also multiple fission. Correct. Okay, we also have Aram joining in. So good evening, Aram and Rabia. We were just starting, Aram. Am I audible to you? Am I audible to you, Aram? If you're speaking, you are mute.
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, so okay, great. So please keep your microphones and cameras, if possible, on so that we can begin with today's class. Okay, so Rabia was going to give a quick recap of the last class. Okay, over to you, Rabia.
Yes, sir. We were doing modes of asexual reproduction like binary fission, multiple fission, budding, and fragmentation, regeneration, and then you also gave us some few questions to answer.
Yeah, right. Would you like to just, as few words as possible, you would like to tell me about binary fission, multiple fission, budding, and fragmentation that we covered in the last class? Not too much, just as little as you can potentially speak about them. Little enough, enough to just explain them. So let's start with binary fission. Yes, Iram, you have a question?
Is the spotlight feature on? Just asking.
Yes, it is. So I think it will be on in all the classes. That's the default. That
But
we
like
are.
I usually get notified. I don't get
I think you
notifications.
joined. Yeah, it's on because it's the option is to remove spotlight. You get notified if you join before the feature is enabled, I think.
Okay.
The feature is by default enabled, so that is to encourage students keeping their cameras and microphones on, also respecting their privacy. So that is between me and you. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Yes. So Rabia, one sentence about each, just to explain what you understood from this. So these are very, very basic things we are just going through right now. Things will be more complicated, and I'm putting all of you in a habit of explaining complicated things in very, very simple sentences. Yes, Rabia.
Yes, sir. In binary fission, a single bacteria or amoeba, it gets divided into two daughter cells.
Mm-hmm.
And in multiple fission,
Simple, multiple.
Yes, from one single cell, it gives rise to many cells, and
Perfect.
in budding, there is it occurs in hydra or yeast, and on the parent body, a little bud arises, and when it gets matured enough, it gets removed from the parent body. And in fragmentation, it occurs in spirogyra. In spirogyra, the parent body gets divided into single fragments, and in regeneration, if it's
Regeneration,
accidentally cut.
we didn't complete it, but if you want to speak about it, you're most welcome. But this is where we stopped, and I gave you some questions, right, to do.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Iram, for giving some hope of light. Okay, and for keeping the class not a blank screen. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's start from here. I gave you certain questions yesterday, all of you. So what were the questions? Anyone would like to read? Rabia, would you like to read the questions? Just the questions.
Sure, sir.
Yeah.
First question, is regeneration a true mode of reproduction? Second one, what is the difference between fragmentation and regeneration? And the third one, which is more better, asexual or sexual reproduction?
Yes, so let's start with the first one. So is regeneration a true mode of reproduction? Anyone?
Yes, in my opinion.
Okay, so in Rabia's opinion, regeneration is a true mode of reproduction. Yes, and how would you justify that statement, Rabia?
Sir, because reproduction is a process which gives rise to new offsprings, and in regeneration, same thing occurs. It gives rise to new offsprings. So I feel like it's true. It's like a mode of reproduction.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough to think. And let's also go to Iram and know her opinion before we discuss this. So the floor is open. So let's take the other, or I don't know if it's the counter or the same opinion. Yes, Iram.
So no, I oppose this point, sir, because I think
That's
that
great.
fragmentation.
Oppositions are always good in science. And why do you think so? It's not a true mode of reproduction?
So in fragmentation, it's basically the process of asexual reproduction where each fragment grows, but regeneration, it is an unfortunate type of reproduction where like the organism loses the body part, and that grows into another organism. So this is not like an option for reproduction, but it's an unfortunate one, I believe so.
Okay, so saying unfortunate, don't you think it's even more unfortunate for the organism to break into 10 pieces and then those 10 pieces grow into 10 individuals rather than, a part of the organism cut and then it regrows into a new organism? And just because I think that will be something that Rabia will contest, right, Rabia?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so Iram, would you like to
So
say something about it?
like back then in 10th, we learned that fragmentation happens on purpose. Like the organism is in the yeah, it will reproduce, it will break itself. But regeneration, it's not that. It is rather, I would say, the body or the organism loses the body part. Let me take it. So just a minute, please.
Yes, you're sure. No issues. We are all at home. Classes from home is like this only. So if you someday see my roommate just walking through and offering me food, just bear with
I'm
it.
so sorry, sir. Please close.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
I was just saying that if you someday see my flatmate coming through and giving me food, just be okay with that.
Okay.
He often does that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So like I was saying that only. That's what I think.
Okay, right. So you both have a point actually. But the way I teach fragmentation and regeneration, why I ask students to argue first or to discuss first, debate first, is because The way NCERT or even in schools, these two processes are taught, they don't tell you the difference, the mechanistic difference between these two. If you look from a broader perspective, fragmentation is body breaking down. The word breaking is used to just make it a different thing, but it's the same thing, right? Body is breaking, cutting, splitting into multiple parts, and then all these parts have the capability to grow into a new organism. For regeneration also it's the same. You lose a body part, and from that lost body part sometimes new organism is formed. Fragmentation and regeneration fundamentally at the level of cellular mechanisms for some organisms have no difference. For example, planaria and hydra, whether a hydra is showing fragmentation or regeneration, it's the same thing. You first fragment a hydra, then the hydra will regenerate from all those fragments. Do you understand that, Rabia? And so for a
Yes, sir.
hydra, fragmentation is regeneration. For a planaria, fragmentation, regeneration, both are the same thing. Okay, but biologically, regeneration is a different thing. If you look at the term, it says regeneration. It generates something back. So regeneration is not considered in biology a true mode of reproduction. And in this, and Rabia can contest this, and we can continue. I can give you some more evidences to convince. If you're not convinced, Rabia, please do ask. Regeneration is not a mode of reproduction. It is rather an ability of an organism. And why I say that, Rabia was true in saying that reproduction simply means producing new offsprings, and through regeneration, many organisms can do that. Perfectly correct. For example, hydra can do that, planaria can do that. But all organisms that can regenerate cannot make offspring through that process. For example, we all know about salamanders and newts, right? Lizards. Lizards can regenerate their tail. Salamanders can regenerate their limbs back. But if you take a salamander, this is the head of the salamander, let's say the body of the salamander and a tail, and it has limbs, okay? So if I cut the tail of a salamander, this cut tail, so this salamander that has lost the tail can regrow it back, okay? But this tail cannot become a new salamander. That's not possible. Do you understand that, Rabia?
Yes, sir.
So that the salamander still has, newts, lizards still have the ability to regenerate, but that is limited to only certain organs. Humans also show regeneration capability. Our liver is a very good example of an organ that has regenerative capabilities. Our liver can regenerate itself. If there is an injury in the liver, and let's say this is a human liver, and if you cut this part of the liver, our liver will regenerate back. That is why liver is the only organ that if a donor donates for transplantation, it regenerates back in the donor. It also regenerates in the recipient. Okay, you're not losing it forever when you're donating it. A healthy liver I'm talking about. Apart from liver, all our nail bed and the hair follicles have this regenerating capability. So basically our nails continuously keep regenerating. But if I take out my nail bed or my liver or any other, skins can regenerate, right? That's how our injuries heal. So, but any of this cannot help us, or any of the ability of a salamander to regenerate cannot help a salamander to reproduce into a new organism or to form a new offspring. Do you understand that, Rabia?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Earthworms also regenerate when birds come and peck at earthworms, and earthworm gets broken into two pieces. So the bigger piece, which will be alive, it will regenerate the tail back. Okay. So it's more of an ability in higher organisms, and only in lower organisms it can be used as a mode of reproduction. That's why we call regeneration more of an ability of a living system to regain the lost body parts, but we don't call it a true mode of reproduction. Fragmentation we call a true mode of reproduction because, like Iram pointed out, some organisms have this ability to self-fragment themselves. Okay, they have a special pathway through which they make their own fragments. They don't have to necessarily depend on an external factor like Hydra has to. Others don't have to, and then from each fragment a new organism will come out. Okay, so fragmentation still holds true because all the organisms that show fragmentation, they only show it for reproduction, but all the organisms that show regeneration do not necessarily show it for reproduction. Is that, I hope this point is clear to both of you? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And you have written certain points, or do you want me to dictate? Because this is a question, this is a valid question that comes in your boards from this part. Write down the question. Why is regeneration not considered a true mode of reproduction? And the answer is, write down, regeneration is not considered a true mode of reproduction because most of the higher organisms that show regeneration do so to regrow the lost body parts, and not necessarily to reproduce. Okay, you can give the example of a lizard's tail or a human liver, nail bed, etc., etc. Very well, so it's an ability. Now the second question I asked you was, what was the second question?
The differences between fragmentation and regeneration.
Yeah, that we discussed. For fragmentation, you have to depend on, most of the organisms have to depend on an external factor that breaks them. Some organisms, though, can also self-break themselves. Regeneration, it always happen when there is an injury or a body part is lost. That's first difference. It cannot be auto-initiated. You cannot regenerate on your own. A lizard cannot just decide to regenerate another new tail till that tail is there. Okay, lizards can decide to shed their tail on their own, so that's called auto lysis of their tail. They break down their own tail in defense and then try to regrow it back. So that can happen. The second difference is fragmentation is a true mode of reproduction in lower organisms, whereas regeneration can also be shown by higher organisms. Unlike fragmentation, fragmentation cannot be shown by higher organisms and regeneration can. And fragmentation is a true mode of reproduction and regeneration is not. Okay, is that clear, everyone? And the third question was opinion based, where I ask you, what do you think? And this question is a bridge which will lead us to discussing sexual reproduction in detail in today's class. What do you think is better according to you? And when I ask what do you think is better, also think about what is happening in nature. If something is better, it stays. Okay, so which is a better mode of reproduction, sexual or asexual? Okay, before we go into that, let me divide. Rabia will defend sexual reproduction in a sense that she will tell me the advantages of having sexual reproduction in organisms, and Iram will defend asexual reproduction. She already gave a smirkish smile to me, like she knows. Yes, but yes, Iram will defend asexual reproduction, and you have to give me advantages of asexual reproduction. Okay, so I give both of you 1 minute to prepare. Just write advantages, minimum 2, maximum 4. Okay, and your time starts now, Rabia and Iram. we'll go first with Rabia because that's easier to defend through all the textbook knowledge that you have. A few more seconds. Okay, shall we start with Rabia? Rabia, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Yes, tell me, what are your points to defend it?
In sexual reproduction, obviously the chances of variations are high, and because of
So
the
also give me time to write, okay? So your first point is high variation, right?
yes, sir.
Possible. Okay, you're saying chances of variation is high, and that is very interesting because students often say that in sexual reproduction there is variation, in asexual reproduction there is no variation. But I like the fact that you are saying that chances of variation is high. So you are not making it an, so that's interesting. I will ask why are you saying this later on. So first is high variation possible according to you. That's one advantage. Yes. Anything more? Minimum 2. Yes. Maximum 4. Second.
Yes, sir. Since the offspring is present inside the mother's body, it can be protected from all kinds of harms and infections and diseases.
Okay, so protection of offsprings, we will discuss on this. Good.
And the another point is that it can get well nourished, like the chances it can have a proper nourishment since it's present inside the mother's body. So
Nourishment of offsprings. Okay. We're not taking all these points as to be correct because I'll give Iram a chance to counter argue your points, and I'll give you the chance to counter argue Iram's points about advantages. Any else? Any other advantage? Variation, protection, nourishment, and
chances of evolutions are high.
so drives evolution, you mean? Sexual reproduction drives
Yes.
evolution,
Yes.
right? Okay, fair enough. Is that it, or you want to say more?
No, so that's it.
That's it. Oh, sorry, I wrote your points in asexual, right? You talked about sexual. Yes, Iram, what are your point advantages? Let's defend. Let's see your arguments.
So in asexual reproduction, process of reproduction is rapid.
Rapid. It's faster.
Yeah.
In comparison, right? Sexual is, you're saying, slow. Okay.
Yeah. And less of energy requirements.
Less energy required. Okay. And why do you think so? Why do you think less energy is required? Both are making babies, offsprings. What is your rationale to think less energy is required? Because it's just written in NCERT, or you have your thought process behind it? If you don't have your thought process, then we have to generate one. I can't let you go by just remembering. See, I promised you one thing in the beginning of the class. I will make biology less memory loaded for you, right? So this is the way. Why do you think it's
So,
less energy required?
I have no such opinion. Like that's what we've been taught.
You just learned it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, we'll discuss this. Anything else? Faster, less
Only
energy
one
required.
parent is.
Okay, so
That's it.
only one parent required. Okay, cool. So 3. Okay, now Iram, I give you chance to counter argue any point from these 4 that you would like to contest that does not truly gives an advantage, or you say that that is not entirely true. Do you agree with all these 4, or you say that
I don't.
something is? Yeah.
I don't agree with the first one.
First one.
Yeah.
So you don't agree that in sexual reproduction there is high variation. You're mute, I think, Iram, if you're speaking.
I mean, there is variation, but I don't think about high variations.
So okay. So I think the way I wrote it is slightly confusing. I think what Rabia meant is in sexual reproduction there is higher variation as compared to asexual reproduction. Is that correct, Rabia?
Yes, sir. The chances of variations are high. Like,
Higher, but you are comparing it with asexual, right? Higher as compared to
yes, sir.
asexual. Yes. So that makes it a valid point, isn't it? You know. Yeah. Anything else you would like to contest? See, this is your point. If you contest others' point, then finally you will do great. You're mute if you're speaking. So Rabia said high variation, protection of offsprings, nourishment, and it drives evolution.
So, like, what do you mean by nourishment of offsprings?
I don't know. It's not my point. You can ask Rabia what does she mean. I didn't dictate it, did I? It's Miss Rabia's point. Rabia, what do you mean by nourishment of offspring? Would you like to explain again to Iram, because I think she would like to contest this point? How will you defend your point, nourishment of offsprings?
Sir, I feel like offsprings can be well nourished compared to the offsprings from asexual reproduction.
And what is your rationale? Because just because they are inside the mother's body? Because if that is a rationale, then I can argue against it, saying that not all fertilizations takes place inside the mother's body. There are external fertilizations where fertilization happen outside the body and the baby also develops outside the body, like in case of tadpoles, frog, in case of insects, in case of fish, where fertilization happen outside the body. So the baby is never inside the body. Even in case of insects and birds, they lay eggs when the baby is yet not formed properly and the baby is forming outside. Yes, you can say that it is protected by a shell covering inside the egg, and I take it as a point. But what about fish and frogs? There it is not at all inside the body. You can also draw back your in science it's a very good practice to know that, okay, so that doesn't make much of a sense, so let me take back that point. Or you can defend if you still believe in that with logic.
No, sir, I'll take back my points.
So fast, don't do that. Okay, let me defend this point of yours. If you would have said that in sexual reproduction, because the whole method of reproduction requires a lot of energy, so a lot of energy can be provided to the developing embryo, then still your point holds some sense and it's true. But when you talk about nourishment, the basic nourishment that is required, it happens in both, because if nourishment is not there, asexual reproduction will not be able to produce viable, healthy babies at the end, right? But it does, like in binary fission or through budding. So budding is asexual, right? But in the budding, the bud is still attached to the mother's body, which is the mother hydra, and mother body provides all the nutrition to the bud till the time the bud can become independent. So the the nourishment angle is taken care of, and it has to be taken care of all the time whenever an organism is reproducing. You cannot make malnourished and unhealthy progenies, because that defeats the whole purpose of making progenies, right? Rabia, make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this point of yours we are taking back, but after some discussion. So you both are onto 3 to 3 points. Okay, Rabia, your mm, chance now to. Do you content any point given by Iram as advantages of asexual reproduction? Or you would like to ask for any clarifications? What do you think? So Rabia, do you agree it is faster in comparison? Asexual reproduction is faster, whereas sexual reproduction is slower.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you agree that asexual reproduction uses less energy?
I think it uses more energy.
It uses more energy. Yeah. Okay. So yes. So Iram could not defend this point very well. So let me try. So it's true that asexual reproduction takes less energy as compared to sexual reproduction. Though
So,
we do not have. Yes, Iram,
so
you would
sorry
like
to
to.
interrupt, but like I have a
No, no.
small
Yeah.
opinion.
Yes.
I think less energy required means that in sexual, what happens is there is fusion of gametes, right? So that would require energy.
Fusion
But
does not require energy, but what requires energy is formation of gametes. You were very close.
oh yeah, like I was
You just
thinking about
missed the
that.
bullseye, and you were beating around the bush. Yes. So that's a very 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 valid argument. So Rabia, sexual reproduction is energy consuming because the very first process, the very first step to do sexual reproduction is to make sex cells, to make gametes, right? And these gametes need to be very very high energetic cells. If you see sperm loaded with mitochondria energy, it has to move, and compete with millions of other sperms to fertilize the ovum. If you look at ovum is also very carefully programmed cell with lots and lots of nutrition, protein, DNA content inside it. So to make these sex cells, there is a whole huge pathway that runs inside the uh, reproductive organs of these organisms, which takes a lot of energy. So before you even begin the process, you have to spend energy. Asexual reproduction also takes energy. I'm not saying that to make a bird you don't need energy. You need energy for sure. You also have to provide nourishment to the bird, but you don't have to do unnecessary things like making gametes, exchanging gametes, making other kind of sex organs. So if you look at a human body has also developed and evolved ovaries and testes to make these gametes. Inside these ovaries and testes, there is blood supply with nutrition that keep these gametes alive, that helps in proliferation, maturation of these gametes, release of these gametes. Then these gametes travel very long distances to reach a point where they both meet, fusion happens. After that also there is embedding of the female gamete, and the embryo develops inside the body, and for whatever time it develops, it continues to take energy. uh, but in asexual reproduction, you do need to give energy, but for a brief period of time. No energy requirement before and after the process. Okay, but in sexual reproduction there is energy before, during, and after the process which is required. So do you understand in what context we are saying that it requires less energy?
Yes, sir.
Rabia? Yes. So second point is also fairly correct, holds true. Third, only one parent is required is again an advantage. But I told you in the last class, which Iram was not very careful about, It's not good to use the word parent. If you use it in boards, you will not lose any marks, because, but the concept is better than one parent. What can I say? Only one sex is involved. You don't need two different sexes for asexual reproduction because it's asexual. You know, just with one parent, sexual reproduction can also happen. If you both forgot, let me just go a little back and talk about these beautiful organisms called earthworms. In the same earthworm body, we have both the sexes present, right? So it's the same single organism. It is the mother also, it is the father also in that record. So it is the same parent, okay? But it is producing both kind of gametes. It is fusing it, and it can do self-fertilization. So instead of using one body or one parent, you use only one type of sex is required, or only one body is required, okay, instead of parent. But it holds true. Now coming to Rabia's point, yes, sexual reproduction does have high variation. Instead of saying high variation, let me just tell you for now, sexual reproduction is responsible for genetic variation. Okay, genetic variation is there in sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is not able to generate genetic variation on its own. But as we will go further in class 12th and we will come to genetics chapter, I will tell you there are other mechanisms by which even asexual organisms can produce genetic variations, but that is not related to this chapter here. Okay, so this is fundamental. So for now, just remember genetic variation is produced very easily in sexual reproduction, but it's not happening in asexual reproduction. Protection of offspring parts. Even in asexual reproduction, the offsprings are protected to a lot of extent. But what you can say as an advantage of sexual reproduction is that in sexual reproduction, there are less number of offsprings produced per cycle as compared to asexual. So it is easier to, what do you say, to take care of those offsprings, right? So protection angle to some extent I'll accept. It's not entirely wrong. So it's correct. And sexual reproduction drives evolution. In this, I think what we can say better is that due to sexual reproduction, there is better adaptive evolution. You know about adaptations? Now let me give you an example. And this is very important, fundamental for your rest of the chapters. Let's say there is a organism that reproduces through sexual method, okay? So that organism has 10 offsprings, let's say. Now all these 10 offsprings have some or the other genetic variation. So they are not entirely exact copies of each other when it comes to genetics. Is it clear, both of you? There is another organism which reproduces asexually. That organism also produces 10 offsprings. But in that case, because of lack of genetic variation, all the 10 offsprings have the same genetic background. Okay. So offsprings that are produced through asexual reproduction, we often call them clones. Clones means exact copies of each other. Now let's say both these two organisms live in cold water. Okay, is it clear? So far so good. Organism S, which reproduces sexually, and organism A, which reproduces asexually. Okay, now organism S had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 offsprings, and organism A had similarly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 offsprings. Okay, 10 in both cases. Now all the offsprings are slightly different from each other, right? In this case, all the offsprings are exactly same copies of each other. Now they both live in cold environment, let's say 5 degrees Celsius. They both survive very well at 5 degrees Celsius. Okay. Now over time, what happens? Due to changes in the nature is always changing, right? Climate change is one thing that we always talk about. In evolution, throughout, nature has changed a lot. So this, in their habitat, the temperature starts rising and it reaches 6 degrees, 7 degrees, it finally reaches 10 degrees Celsius. So when it reaches 10 degrees Celsius, what will start happening is that it is an uncomfortable situation, right? Organisms will start dying. So let's say this one died, this one died, this one also died, this one died, and this one also died. And you're left with, now you're left with 1, 2, 3, 4. Half died, so you're left with 5. Temperature still is increasing, it reaches 15 degrees Celsius. Again, some of them will die, but we are left with 2. Now, why is this happening in this case? Whereas in this case, when the temperature will rise, all of them will die. Can you think of any mechanism? So no survival, zero survival. Why is this happening? Anything that comes to your mind? Any idea? How can it happen? Let me give you a hint. To survive in cold environment, what do an organism need? So if you have to survive in a cold country, let's say you go from Middle East to stay in Canada, okay? Toronto. It's very, very cold. So over time, how will you survive? So of course, we will wear more clothes. We will put a bomber jacket and all. But imagine of a cat or a dog, what it will have to do to survive, or even humans will do in the beginning to survive. When winters come, what do we start doing? Winters come at your place. Where do you live? Yeah, of course. Winters must be.
Really?
Not really, but comparatively cooler days must be. Very rarely, but cooler days must be coming, right? Comparatively, some cooler days. So when we feel cold, what is our response to that cold? Apart from wearing more clothes, that is a behavioral response. Clothes are not a part of our biology. It is a part of our culture and human ethics. Human decided to wear clothes. Other organisms did not. So what will other organisms do to tackle the cold? They will start producing heat in their body if they can, right? And they will start shivering. Isn't that true? We start shivering when we feel cold. Yes or no? Shivering is a mechanism. And let me tell you, if you find two, it's always a thing. There are two people who are suffering from hypothermia. How will you know which is in a bad state? Both are almost on the verge of becoming unconscious, or both are unconscious, let's say, or subconscious. One is shivering vigorously, very, very vigorously. The other is just lying down, not even shivering. Which one is in more danger? Which one is about to die first? You know that? The one which is shivering vigorously, or the one which is not shivering yet and is unconscious?
The one who is shivering vigorously.
No, the one which is not able to shiver and is unconscious is about to die first. If you are able to shiver, it is a clear-cut sign that your body still has energy to keep the engine on and keep you shivering. Shivering requires energy, right? So when you start feeling cold, you start to shiver, which means your body is trying to your body is trying to heat up itself. But when you are unconscious and not even shivering, it means that your fuel is over and you are just about to, die now due to hypothermia. So we should first attend the one who's just lying unconscious, not even shivering, because the body is not even able to shiver, not even able to defend itself. Do you understand that, Rabia? That kind of knowledge will not come through textbook unless and until you will discuss. That's the reason why you study biology. So when you will become doctors, if you know these things about human biology, or why are you studying biology, you will be not just wise but also useful to humans, other humans. Similarly, think what must be happening in organism S that cannot happen in organism A. So they were living for generations in 5 degrees. Then all of a sudden global warming started happening. Temperature started rising. Why few survived and other could not? Quick. Any guess? Just a wild guess. What if maybe you are just right?
Because they got adapted to the surroundings.
Perfect. And how? That, I think that part is clear. I think that part even Iram knew, but she was not saying. So we know that, yeah, she's saying yeah. I can just hear her yeah without, even if she's mute. So she's not impressed by her answer, Rabia. But you can, but you started on the right course. So how do you think the two which are surviving could adapt, but others could not to higher temperatures? Any wild guess, even if you think it's very absurd, illogical, biology can maybe accommodate your answer. What do you think camels are different in doing than polar bears? Because camel adapted to live in deserts, polar bear cannot live in deserts. So what do camels have that polar bears don't have, that you can use that analogy here? Any idea? Remember, this is all happening because you said that there is genetic variation in sexual reproduction. I have just bring the spoon right in front of your mouth. You just have to open it and gulp. Come on, try, Rabia. You both will get better at this, at the reasoning with time. That's where you start enjoying biology. Okay, so let me lead both of you. The moment you realize you know the answer, just unmute and start shouting. So the progenies that died could not withstand increasing heat because they do not have any cooling mechanism in their system. Okay, for example, if you see camel have a mechanism to survive in desert, which is camel have very less or almost no body hair, right? But polar bears have a thick fur on its body. Camels also do have hair, like camel wool is shredded, but if you look at the vital parts, like if you look at the vital organs, and camel has a hump to store water, right? So these are all changes that camel has made, that to survive in a hot environment I need to make certain changes in the body, and because of that a camel can survive and the polar bear cannot. So for these organisms, let's say due to genetic variation, there was a mutation in these two organism, this one and this one. There was a mutation word you don't know yet, so let me not use it, but there was a change in a protein.
It's
Yes, it's
a change basically, right? Mutation.
and that's what I said.
Yeah, that's what I know.
That's what you know. Okay, great. Yeah, it's a change. So let's hold with the change part for now. Okay, I'll tell you in detail later on. So due to some genetic variation, these two organisms happen to have a change in a gene that other three did not have. And let's say this gene helps in controlling temperature, inside temperature of the body. Okay, so even if temperature is rising on the outside, these organisms could control a lower temperature. That could be one possibility by which due to which they survived but the others died. And even among those two, when the temperature still is continuously rising, the ones that will strengthen that change, like pass on that change from generation to generation to generation through genes, will continue to survive. So when climate changes, organisms adapt. Ones that cannot adapt die, but always out of hundreds of progenies, few will always adapt. That is the best thing about sexual reproduction. Whatever happens to organisms, sexual reproducing organisms will find a way to survive, but given that the change is happening at a slow pace. If I take a frog and put it in a boiling water, the frog will not adapt, the frog will die. Okay, but if the temperature is rising very slow over generations, then that adaptation can be passed on from one generation to another. That is called a evolutionary adaptation due to sexual reproduction. In case of asexually reproducing organism, because all had the same gene like the parent, so when temperature started changing, they could not do anything different from their parent, right? So if one was destined to die, all were destined to die. Do you understand this? And why I'm explaining this to you is, why we are spending some time here is because this is a foundation for upcoming classes. Sexual reproduction ensures variation, but even in sexual reproduction, there is a caveat. If I make two organisms reproduce sexually, let's not make it here, let's make it here. So two organisms reproduce sexually and then they produce two offsprings. Now, if I make these two offsprings, which are technically biologically siblings, but if I make these siblings reproduce, which in human ethical language is called an incest, then they had the similar genes from their parents, right? When they will reproduce, they will give rise to another two offsprings. And if I continue doing this, because we can do it in animals, in mouse or other model systems, then what we are doing, it's called inbreeding depression. So marriages, even in human societies, we have now started figuring it out that a vast majority of society that follow close caste systems, or a vast majority of the Muslim world societies that follow consanguineous marriages. So a culture that started long back was necessary at some point of time for making clans or keeping groups together. But over time, that practice should have been stopped, because when you keep marrying in your own extended family or within the same caste, or in some cultures it is the same village, or it is the same clan, or it is the same coast, in every culture of the world there are these practices. Then what happens over time, your genes keep on getting accumulated. Because if a man is marrying to a woman, but the woman is related to the man 3 generations ago, then basically you do not have scope to make variations beyond these 3 generations, right? So over time, all your genes are getting accumulated. And when genes accumulate and there is less and less and less of variation, exactly this thing happens. Whenever there is any mutation, any problem anywhere in the gene, there is no copy to rescue it. There is no healthy copy to rescue it. So one of the biggest example and study of this is, there was a disorder called microencephaly. It's still there. The word micro means small, okay? Microchips, micro SD cards. And encephalon, the word encephalon is for brain, head, okay? So the biological name of brain is diencephalon, because we have 2 hemisphere in the brain, right? So diencephalon. Microencephaly, now, without me telling you what that disease is, I'm pretty sure that Rabia can tell me what happens in microencephaly. If you understand the word, Rabia, can you tell me what do you think happens in microencephaly? Are you there, Rabia?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What do you think happens in microencephaly? You don't even have to think. You have to see and tell.
In that the head or the brain of the baby is small compared
It
to
does
the
not.
average.
Yes. It does not grow. Babies are born with smaller heads as compared to their body. So if their heads are smaller, their brains are smaller. If their brains are smaller, they will not develop centers for cognition, speech, recognition, intelligence, things like that. So they are mentally challenged and retarded babies, and they don't do well in life in terms of mental capabilities. Now, this microencephaly was figured out to be very, very prevalent. It's a very rare, it should be a very rare disorder that should happen one in, 10 million or 50 million kids just by a chance mutation. But in a particular region of Pakistan, scientists started studying that the cases of microencephaly has grown in last 20 years. And when they tracked down the reason, they realized that most of the couples were close cousins. And in most of these couples, on both male and female chromosome, there was a mutated copy for brain development, a gene which is very important for brain development. So if male has a mutated copy, which is a disordered copy, female should have a normal copy so that their babies can get at least one normal copy and the brain can develop normally. So we don't need both the normal copies to develop normally. Even one normal copy will work. But in these cases, both parents had, abnormal copies. So they contributed abnormal copies to the baby, and these babies were increasing. It's still a case there. So now awareness started. So scientists and in Pakistan, biologists in that region started coming up and started spreading the awareness that we have to stop consanguineous marriages. We have to start marrying in distant villages or distant places to people who are not genetically related to us, because one reason that humans are humans is genetic diversity. We have to maintain genetic diversity. That is our way to fight a lot of recessive disorders. Is that part clear to you, why sexual reproduction is important and why variation is important biologically?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So yes, so today we learned about these fundamentals, and I will stop with the homework, which is more of like you have to spend some time on this, but I still want both of you to do it. We will now outright jump into sexual reproduction first. So I know because your exams will also happen in school. So let's start with human reproduction. We will keep coming back to chapter 1 for many concepts. Okay. We will stop at regeneration. We will pick vegetative propagation when we will do plant reproduction. Is that clear? So from next class onwards, we will try to dive into human reproduction. And for that, I want to read the process of fertilization from wherever you can read it. So you have to make a note, write a paragraph or bullet point wise, the process of fertilization in humans. I want you to figure out. And the second thing I want you to figure out is embryogenesis. What is embryogenesis? So as much as you can know, what, why, how long it happens in humans and things like that. Okay. So we will start with, because we have set a base of variations and sexual reproduction. So let's go into human sexual reproduction quickly in the next class and prepare you for exams as well. Okay. Then we'll come back to chapter 1 for plant when we will do plant sexual reproduction. Will that work, Rabia? And
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this will also give us a chance to connect reproduction to genetics, which is the next unit, easily. Okay.
Okay.
So yes. Okay, cool. So keep asking questions, keep thinking. I know first few classes are going to be slow because I want you to get in this mode of thinking out of the books. Okay. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I'll see you in the next class. Rabia, is it possible for you to like keep your camera and microphone on from the next class onwards. If that is possible, please do that. And I'll see you in the next class. Bye bye.
Okay, sir. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.